Welcome to my review of the Rockford Files, Season 3, Episode 16, The Becker Connection, written by Juanita Bartlett and directed by Reza Badi. The episode begins at the Becker residence, where Dennis's wife Peggy has arranged a surprise birthday party for him. But before his guests can spring the surprise, he gets a phone call asking him to return to the station. The call leaves him out of sorts and he gets into an argument with Peggy while he's getting ready.
I thought you'd be pleased.
Well, that's your trouble. You're not thinking.
Having car trouble, Jim gives him a lift.
Turn over, you fuck. Need a little help?
We then cut to a racetrack where comedian Jack Carter is playing comedian Marty Golden and is there to meet mobster Alex Kasajian, who is not happy to see him.
You never come around here, never, unless you have an official invite.
We cut back to Dennis, now at the station, where he's questioned about a recent secondment to the drug squad.
You like it in Narco? Not much, but they were short-handed.
After some seized heroin has not only hit the streets, but also been found in Becker's spare tyre.
In my spare time? That's a lie! We found it, Sergeant.
Facing a suspension, Dennis is in no mood for Jim to be annoyed with him, and so explains what's going on and what he's been accused of. After consoling him, Jim drops Dennis home to break the news to Peggy, and we return to the Beckers a few days later, after he has decided to ask Jim to investigate, which Jim naturally refuses.
Boy, they catch me messing around with that. You don't need that kind of trouble, Dennis.
This opening tells us everything we need to know about what the plot is going to be, as we know Dennis isn't a drug lord, and the ambiguous introduction to Marty Golden tells us that he is going to be involved. We just don't know how. It's all given enough time so that even though it's not introducing significant new characters, it is telling us more about Dennis's life and how he's short enough of cash to make it appear that he might be guilty, at least to his superiors. We also get to see just how much of an emotional toll it takes on the normally fairly closed-off Dennis. While it might seem odd that Jim immediately refuses the case, even though it's for one of his best friends, it isn't just because that's what Jim always does. It's there because he is certain of Dennis's innocence, and is also certain that the truth will out.
I don't know what your problem is, Dennis. You're clean. They're cops. You're a cop.
He eventually relents and starts asking Becker's friends in the force, roping in Angel to do some of the legwork too. Angel, as you might expect, is no help.
Yeah, well, the name I came up with was Raphael Sabatini.
Sabatini, that's the name I got from 4 or 5 guys.
Raphael Sabatini has been dead for a couple of 100 years.
But Jim comes across Golden's name and asks Angel to look into him, while Jim investigates another name. One that Becker is certain is the guy.
I busted him about a week and a half ago trying to unload some Mexican mud over a schoolyard fence.
Jim tracks down the guy, and he's dead. Then he gets cold cocked for his trouble, and it certainly looks like it might have been Dennis that killed the man. Without enough evidence, Becker and Jim are both let go, and both followed by the cops. An Angel comes up with the goods on where to find Golden.
He works at a club called the Stage Left on the Strip.
2/3 of the way into this episode, and not much has really happened, plot-wise, beyond the pretty poor frame-up job on Becker that even the cops can't trump up enough evidence for. There's been a lot of investigating, although mostly done through montage, and Jim's finally got to someone we know is involved somehow. But other than that, it's been pretty slow going. We had some great character moments from Dennis in the opening, but he's been sidelined ever since, and there's not a great deal of tension, as they don't really exploit the fact that Dennis is implicated in the murder. I can understand the reluctance to show us that Dennis might possibly be guilty, but I don't understand why people like Chapman are being so understanding. Things pick up when Jim meets Angel to see Marty Golden's awful hackneyed comedy act, which Angel heckles mercilessly,
It's Henny Youngman.
and, as it's open mic night, decides to get up and one-up the comedian. Unfortunately, Angel's act is, let's say, niche, and might actually be worse than Golden's.
I knew a guy in the D block. All his life he wanted to be a tree surgeon, but he kept fainting at the sight of sap. Hey, could I have a little help up there?
Meanwhile, Jim grabs Marty for a quick chat, effectively kidnapping him. Marty reveals that he was paid by Kasajan to put the word out that Becker was on his payroll to put the cops off the scent, because he really does have a cop in his pocket. The rest of the seized drugs are at Kasajan's racetrack, so Jim heads over there, but not before asking Becker to call it in. Unfortunately, Becker calls his pal, Dolan, who is the cop on Kasajan's payroll. So Jim has to make a run for it. Dolan has Rockford pinned down, but Becker arrives just in time to save him, along with the real backup. For me, this is kind of a mediocre filler episode that was common in the 24-episode-a-season drama series of the time, but very uncommon in the Rockford Files. It's very paint by numbers, lacks any of the humour and little of the heart of a usual episode, and doesn't do enough to set up any real jeopardy for Dennis. We know he didn't do anything wrong. It's made pretty clear that everything is setting him up. But the setup isn't that convincing for the police, and the police corruption is dealt with far better in other episodes. It's a real disappointment, especially coming from Juanita Bartlett, who normally does such a good job of injecting great character development into her excellent plots. For that reason, although it's hard to do, I have to give this a 1 out of 5, as for me it has been the most forgettable episode. Thank you. Goodbye.